Cool, man. Well, thanks for joining us, Shreyas. Super excited to talk to you about your background in the crypto space and what you're working on.
Great. Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, so maybe to just get us started, I'd love to hear how you got into crypto. Maybe from there, work your way to like how you got involved in DAO specifically, and then how you got to be working on what you're working on today.
Yeah, for sure. So I first got deep into the Bitcoin and Ethereum rabbit hole probably in 2016. I was basically taking this class where we were designing this alternative currency to the dollar, and I got really deep into what Bitcoin offered, and I was this enthusiastic group member in the class that took it actually very seriously. And after that, maybe end of 2016, 2017, discovered Ethereum and went deep into that. But I actually worked at Duke's endowment for 3 years, and I was leading Duke's crypto efforts. But I always wanted to do something entrepreneurial, and it was an immediate attraction in 2016 where I knew I wanted to work in the space for the long term. I was attracted to these values of open source and programmability and community ownership. And I was kind of lurking on a bunch of these governance forums. I was involved, not actively, but passively, and in a bunch of DAOs and communities. And I just realized that there's something interesting to be done here, to be built here. And specifically, a lot of these DAOs had a shared community treasury that had a lot of assets. First, they had a native token, and then they had the shared community treasury that the community governed over. It was almost like if Google or Stripe opened up their balance sheet for the community to decide how it's being allocated and used, and done in a very internet native way where things were kind of, a DAO at its center is, you have smart contracts and code key rules of property and ownership and membership and governance. And so I was kind of attracted to that. And that's what led to the initial, version of Llama, which I actually built for an ETHGlobal hackathon. And then since then, kind of built this community of now 50 people who are, I would say we constitute one of the leading contributors for large protocol DAOs and other DAOs to help them basically think through economic questions and governance questions.
That's awesome. That sounds like an amazing journey. What a cool class too. Like, I can't believe you got tasked with designing an alternative currency to the dollar. Was that just like an econ class or something?
Yeah, so credit to Professor Peter Millay, if you're listening. But it was a 5-on-5 debate between two teams. One team had to defend the US dollar and explain why this is like the system of the future. And the other team, which was our team, had to explain why that's not the case. And the US dollar as a reserve currency, is doomed to fail at some point, and then design an alternative to that. And so, this was part of a global finance class. And I think I took it quite seriously. I was just like so, deeply into the crypto rabbit hole through that class, where I think I just figured out that, this how Bitcoin works is just so interesting. You just had no idea. I was interested in economics and governance for a long time, since I was, it's small boy and cool, but you never realized that, with crypto, you can actually, it's playful economics. You can actually create things, right? In macroeconomics and governance, typically it's a very static field, right? You just study what's happened in the past. But here you can actually experiment. You can actually create a token, see how people react to it, see what incentives actually do in real life instead of sort of debating in theory. And that was extremely exciting with what was happening in crypto, is that there's thousands of macroeconomic and governance experiments that are just blooming in the space. And you can kind of be an active member in that scene. And that was, that seemed awesome to me.
Yeah, that's super cool. So I'm curious, like, it sounds like at the time you got super excited about, hey, maybe the US dollar isn't the future, or there could be these parallel universes. What do you feel now? Like, it's kind of funny, right? Like, I think everybody who first jumps into the space, there's this like amazing kind of like honeymoon phase where you're like, wait, there's this other way, right? But then obviously, as for those of us that are like contributing full time or just like spending a lot of time in the space, you start to see like some of the pros and cons. So just curious, like, what's your take, updated take if you're doing like your 5-on-5 debate in 2022?
Yeah, it's good you asked me after the bear market is like starting to hit, because I think by kind of Ray Dalio's like general thesis on these currencies going through large long-term cycles, and what happened in 2020 which, the US Fed plus the government doing, money printing plus probably, the most expansive amount of fiscal stimulus was something that was natural in the sense that they, out of all the tools in the toolkit, like that was the one that was left, and they kind of used it to the fullest extent, getting interest rates to 0%, and then doing an excessive amount of fiscal stimulus, which clearly now is reflected in inflation and is, you could probably see is gone too far and has been a negative. I think it's a weird time though, because it's just hard to see also alternatives. So if you see the 2008, 2009 financial crisis, it was a US centered housing bubble that caused this, global financial crash. But the US dollar actually appreciated after that. And US dollar was viewed as a safe haven. And so, previously when the US has kind of dominated the economic and political scene, the dollar is viewed as a safe haven, and people kind of flock to the dollar when they're uncertain about global times. I think it's less, it at least seems weaker now than it did in 2008 and 9 that people would do that. Having said that, it doesn't seem, extremely weak. Like it doesn't seem like there are kind of alternatives, or maybe we live in this like multipolar world where there's sort of many kind of competing currencies. The other thing that crypto adds to is this time of like real global monetary competition, right? Where you have anything can actually compete to be money. And after a certain level of adoption and belief and core sort of technological and security strength at its heart, you can actually then meme money into propagation. And there's sort of thousands of kind of assets that could compete to be money. And decentralized exchange kind of enables this like loosely defined kind of barter economy. So, but I don't think that infrastructure is ready yet for taking on this like global reserve currency status. But maybe at some point that happens. And I think, at that point, you just don't see it. I don't think it's going to be as dramatic or as sudden, but it happens in parallel. And then suddenly people look in retrospect and realize that, oh yeah, the financial system has probably changed forever. Yeah. And that, wasn't obvious like 10 years back.
I love that. That's a very balanced take, which I think we could all use more of, I think we've all been seeing plenty of like, it's all going to zero. When 6 months earlier, it was the same person being like, the US dollar, it's on its last legs. We're going full Bitcoin or ETH standard tomorrow.
Yeah, I think people are, just lemmings. Like the bull market, people tweet bull market things. The bear market, people tweet bear market things. Yeah. And there's just a craving and demand for that like form of media and consumption when you're feeling that way. It's almost like when you're sad and you want to hear sad music to feel sad or something. Like It feels like that's what happens with intellectual content, which is the strangest thing. But the same people who would probably be shilling 6 months back would do the opposite now, and it's like almost like funny to see. And it's fair to reflect, I think, honestly, about what value crypto's added and not added, and whether we have deserved the Vitalik in 2017 asked if does it deserve the market cap it has, and it's fair to keep asking those questions. But it's just funny when it happens like it's just everyone's just mimetic. And everyone does it together.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, I heard you mention Duke. Is that where you went to school?
I didn't go to school at Duke. I went to UVA.
Okay, cool.
But I worked at Duke.
That's also relevant to my question. I went to UNC, so we can talk about that later. Cool. I was hoping you were going to say Duke so we could talk some shit afterwards. But
yeah, I hate Duke. Duke basketball.
We got a decent rivalry too. I think UNC and UVA have been playing for like the longest of any schools. Mm-hmm. Anyway, well, thanks for sharing all that. Appreciate you going down the rabbit hole with me a little bit on money stuff, but would love to, circle back to DAOs and maybe what Llama's doing for DAO treasuries in particular. So I would love kind of like a 2022 update, like current state, like what are the things you're seeing as like opportunities and or challenges for DAOs around treasury management? And then what are you all planning to do to address those things going forward?
Yeah, so Llama is building economic infrastructure for DAOs. And what that means specifically is that we've been working on a bunch of on-chain solutions for DAOs that help them allocate their treasuries, allocate their native tokens, get liquidity for their native tokens, do a bunch of advanced on-chain analytics and reporting, and do very interesting, sophisticated like DAO-to-DAO partnerships and collaborations. And we think that the DAO's native tokens, and tokens can be ownership tokens can be in a different form. Like it could be ERC20s, it could be NFTs, it could be non-transferable ERC20s. And I think that design space needs to keep expanding, and we need to experiment with what actually works. But we kind of work on some of the most interesting projects that can actually help advance the kind of economic output of the DAO space broadly. And we have where I would describe us as the leading contributor DAO to other DAOs. And so Llama has worked with Aave, Uniswap, Gitcoin, Pool Together, Fay Protocol, DYDX, FWB, soon Nouns, and a bunch of others. And we basically have this community of 50 contributors that are some of the top people in the DAO space. This consists of engineers, designers, DeFi strategists, quants, and analytics folks, and accountants. And we just do a bunch of really interesting work with DAOs. And we kind of build solutions internally that really help these contributors maximize their output and efficiency and do things in a way that an average DAO contributor would find it quite hard to do. So I think some of the most exciting things I'm seeing generally in DAOs is one, I would say, so if I had to really narrow it down, DAOs, it really help with extremely liquid capital formation and extremely liquid labor formation. And I think the capital formation part has actually been tried and is working in the sense that, Constitution DAO raised, say, 40 million in 2 weeks from people around the world. It was this global permissionless crowdfunding that was extremely cool and interesting. And especially interesting that, people from India and Africa are trying to own this piece of the US Constitution, which, is quite hard. Typically, it's Ken Griffin or Bill Gates trying to buy this and they just keep it in their homes, they lease it out to a museum, and now you have this community of hundreds of thousands of people deciding what's done with it. So I think the global permissions crowdfunding and then the seamless distribution of ownership is really interesting. And the part that's not really been cracked yet, of course there's elements of this and seen in different DAOs, but really the liquid labor formation, which is a way for anyone from around the world, whether they give their real name or their pseudonym, to really work together and collaborate on something important for a long time. I think what we've seen is liquid labor formation that kind of is in a pop-up DAO sort of format where people kind of work on something and then they leave. And maybe that's fine too as an interesting experiment. But kind of liquid labor formation in the sense of people kind of coming and working in the shared project and leaving and coming again, and others coming again, and making sure this project can last for hundreds of years, and making sure people are incentivized to do that. People have the social and power structures where they feel as there's still continuous both economic and social mobility to continue to contribute to DAO, and not just do it in the early days, but do it after 3 years of the project existing and 4 years of the project existing, and they still have a way to both economically and socially kind of reach the top. And if you think of any institution, that is quite critical, right? So if you think about a company, you want a company is going to thrive as long as the lowest stronger people still feel they have social economic mobility to rise up. The US is going to thrive as long as people think they have economic and social mobility. So I think that stuff is crucial to crack in DAOs, and that requires cracking the ownership incentive structures, cracking some of the social and governance layers of how things are being done. And I think that's the phase I'm most excited about over the next few years.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that idea of labor liquidity or liquid labor formation. And I love how you touched on this idea of sustainability. I think that's something I've seen a lot, where there's kind of this wave of initial interest, and maybe some projects are designed to be that way and it's okay. But I think a lot of the DAOs that you worked with, certainly the ones you mentioned, are really earnestly trying to do work over a long period of time and really sustain that. And I think the more that we can do to design mechanisms or funding strategies or ways of working that kind of allow for that perpetual contribution, the better. I think that's a super key unlock. So I'm glad to have your amazing team and community out there trying to make happen.
Yeah, and the best way we're trying to hit that problem is for ourselves too, right? I want Llama to be a 700-year institution, and so how do you really crack that contributor problem internally, where you have really high impact people come, join, add value, gain economic and social power within Llama as well as broadly in the crypto space, and then that being a continuous thing that keeps happening? And how do you really increase the income of contributors as well as the impact they can have? And almost remove all the other problems that they face of admin and needing to deal with, like, negotiating with a DAO, or needing to deal with payments, and a few of these other things. And so, yeah, that's something that we think we can really work on at Llama, and hopefully use those principles to apply it to other DAOs, because we're a unique setup where we are a community contributing to other communities, and so we have, I think, a lens that can be useful when DAOs are going through a particular phase of development.
I think that's really important. One of the things that I've learned working in the DAO tooling space and just the DAO ecosystem in general is like it's incredibly important to like actively contribute and to DAOs, create DAOs to really understand the problems that DAOs are facing. Like I think it's like a lot more nuanced than people give it credit for. You have a lot of people who are like, oh, DAOs, I know about B2B software. I can just like make DAO tooling. And in my experience, as someone who actually went down that exact path, like it's not true at all. And DAOs are like extremely idiosyncratic at this point. So definitely resonates with me.
Yeah, and you also if you see some of the most interesting DAOs, like they are quite selective about what they use tooling for, right? So NounsDAO, I spoke to one of the Noun holders who leads their grants program, and yeah, he's extremely minimal and he's extremely effective. He wants his work to be relatively unstructured. He wants to be able to easily give out small grants, and working through his workflow of what his problems are is interesting. And you'll only learn that when you actually speak to these these niche communities that are doing interesting things, right? Versus kind of trying to design the solution beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that's great. I actually have seen you. It's funny you brought up Nouns. I think I saw you tweet that like the Nouns funding mechanism is really interesting. So maybe you can talk about that. Like what's interesting about the Nouns mechanism, and maybe even more importantly, like why do you think that's something that other DAOs should potentially be paying attention to going forward?
Yeah, so I think how Nouns works is there's a continuous NFT auction. So there's one NFT auctioned every day forever. The NFT is auctioned in ETH, and so ETH goes to the treasury, and one Nouns NFT equals one vote, and the community decides how the treasury is being spent. And what's most interesting about Nouns is that the community is extremely high quality and active. It's growing at a really steady pace. So say there's, I think, about 350-ish Nouns right now, and so it's not one central event that is a token launch, airdrop, or an ICO, or a strategic raise that is bringing in this new community to own the tokens, but it's a continuous process where the membership actually increases over time, and the treasury grows at a similar pace. And so I think that's especially interesting because typically you have ERC20 tokenized communities like Uniswap or Optimism, or a few of these other communities that have these launches where they say distribute 30 to 60% to a community treasury, and that is probably worth hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. And the community, the default is kind of inactive, inertial state, and the community has to kind of activate things and grow the treasury. And there's thousands of token holders. In the Nouns case, there's actually a small growing community. There's an initial bias towards action instead of inaction, and there's actually no problem with kind of token liquidity. So one of my views is that you actually want tokens to be either extremely liquid, like Aave or Uniswap, and it has a certain level of product market fit and attention where everyone knows that it's traded. You don't actually need even liquidity incentives, but the token is widely traded on decentralized exchanges, as well as it's listed on centralized exchanges without even needing a market maker. Or you want your token to be extremely illiquid, which means it should either be non-transferable, like communities like Metacartel or C Club have non-transferable tokens, or it should be non-fungible, communities like Nouns, or it should be just non-existent and you shouldn't have it. Because the sort of mid-space of token liquidity, which I see a lot of communities have, is kind of destructive because it gives an illusion of price, but price actually doesn't exist because the tokens actually are not that liquid, but the communities can see the market cap every day, and you just are seeing this number going up and down. And it's the weirdest comment because if it's extremely liquid, you see numbers going up and down, that's one thing because you actually can act on that information. But when numbers going up and down and you actually can't sell your tokens, you can't buy too much, like or other strategic partners can't come in and participate. It's just it has a weird effect on communities. And so I think Nouns has kind of cracked that problem, and of course Nouns has extremely interesting on-chain art creation. If I had to summarize, like Nouns' auction mechanism is very interesting, and that's the mechanism to get membership in the DAO. And then the distribution mechanism from the treasury is interesting because most DAOs, the default is the treasury doesn't do much. And in Nouns' case, they have one of the most active governance proposals. They also have 3 ways that they generally distribute treasury funding. So there's small grants for like, say, 0.1 to 1 ETH. Above 30 ETH, you go to on-chain governance. And then this mid space where like, say 2 to 10 ETH, where they have this mechanism called Prop House, which is kind of like weekly contest that Nouns holders vote on to decide how the treasury is allocated, to these smaller funding proposals. So yeah, I think it's a DAO that has probably one of the most interesting experiments in governance and treasury allocation and art creation right now.
That's really cool. I feel like Nouns is almost underhyped. I don't know, like amongst hardcore Ethereum people who have like some interest in NFTs, it's has like extremely high levels of mindshare. It's like super hip, but like broadly speaking, people don't actually, aren't as aware of like how innovative what they're doing is in a lot of cases. So glad to see you're shining some light on like different approaches to DAO governance and treasury management. I think like it's really easy, especially in a bear market, to be like, oh, well, like, this isn't working, that isn't working, governance only tokens are broken, blah, blah, blah. I thought you've actually isolated some of the problems like in an insightful way there. But, I think to move forward, it's like we have to try different things, right? And that's kind of how we'll end up figuring out things that work. So appreciate you shining a light on like some of the things Nouns is doing a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. I love what you said. You're like, okay, you either want it to be liquid, like super liquid, or like non-fungible or non-transferable or just no token. Curious about NFTs in particular, transferable NFTs like Nouns, like super illiquid. Definitely can see how that could be like a feature instead of a bug. Do you think that is a path that could make sense for DAOs that aren't like art focused, right? Like obviously there's this natural, like the token has some level of liquidity, or sorry, not liquidity, utility with Nouns, right? Where it's like kind of makes sense because like people also want the art in addition to the governance power. Do you think like that's something other DAOs should be exploring that aren't even necessarily like art focused in the way that Nouns is?
So Nouns is a very simple primitive, and I don't think that like replicating Nouns is going to work, right? Like the 1,000 noun model that has the same format, it's not like that's going to work. It's not the be all and all solution to problems. It's just that this mechanism is kind of interesting and the community participation is interesting. So an example of, one that doesn't have to rely on artwork is, let's say FWB, so Friends with Benefits is this social DAO that requires people to buy 75 FWB to gain membership in the DAO, and it's a token gated Discord, and and so that's how they've worked so far. And they've been among the social DAOs, I think, relatively known and successful community. Now imagine if FWB instead ran this as with a Nouns model, and you make some tweaks to the Nouns model. So you have an NFT auctioned every so often, let's say every day to begin with, but it's adjustable by governance. So governance can actually tweak the membership. It can increase it or decrease it at different points in the community. And the NFT is, enables access to the DAO and voting and governance rights, just like FWB tokens would. But the difference is now FWB actually has a way to earn ETH in the treasury. And so, right now they had to do a $10 million fundraise from venture investors. Instead, if they just had like a large treasury in ETH from this continuous NFT auction, that would be interesting. And you could have people have this membership, held in these FWB NFTs. There could be an art component to that and culture component to that, like knowing the FW community, like that would be the case. But there is utility in the sense that people are holding the NFT to join the DAO. And you could see how, right now Nouns is just like one NFT every day forever. But FWB, it might be relevant to really stop membership at a certain point because maybe the community has gotten too big or it's reduced in quality or there's too many speculative people. You can increase membership at a time where you want more people to join. You can just have other things, like you can maybe have a whitelisted membership. Maybe in some cases you actually just gift these NFTs to some people. So you could tweak the primitive in interesting ways to account for other types of experiments. And I think FWB right now has a this like it falls in the semi-liquid token category, which is the price is like falling. The community is like looking at the price, and it's a weird one because the price is kind of everything is falling right now, but the price is a fake price because the token doesn't have too much liquidity, and so it's one that would benefit from this, non-fungible token model that's a continuous auction that, has some ways you can adjust it that you don't need to accomplish the same things as nouns, but you still use the underlying primitive in an interesting way.
Cool. Well, thanks for digging into that. I appreciate it. Before we go, just want to ask you like a totally non-crypto question, just so the audience can get to know you a little better. So, what is your favorite place in the world and why?
Yes, I'll just name name a few places. One, I'm from Bangalore in India, and really love Bangalore. It's my hometown. I grew up there, and I have very fond memories of the city. I love that it's a city full of trees, and has clearly the best weather anywhere around the world. Like throughout the year, it's except in summer it gets a little hot, but it's like really nice weather throughout the year. And there's a few things I like masala dosa, and I like this place called Corner House that has cake fudge, and so I think Bangalore is and all my close friends are there, and so Bangalore is a place that I have a strong connection with. Outside of Bangalore, I would say one that that has been a fun one is actually Paris, which is the first time I visited Paris. I didn't like it at all because I thought the like outwardly people just seemed extremely judgmental and a little snooty and it felt like it felt a little cold and it's just different and people speak French but then I've been there twice after that and every time I have a similar impression but I kind of get it and it's just I kind of get why they why they are judging the rest of us. They do see they, they just are they are cooler in some ways. They dress better. They have extremely good taste, which I think is something I've developed an opinion on. But I think taste actually there is like something objective about better taste. Like I don't think it's entirely you have one taste and I have another taste. I think there's some subjectivity, but some people just have better taste. And I think Parisians do. And I think the seating where they have these chairs outside and people are smoking cigarettes and kind of looking at people and commenting on them is very interesting. I think it's very distinct, right? Because everywhere else around the world, you have it's like friendly people around the world. America is very cheery people. Saying hi, how are you, and like greeting you with a big smile. You don't get that in Paris, and that's cool because it's distinct. And then recently, like I have one of my friends, Louis, actually, who is a Parisian, and he introduced me to a bunch of his friends, and I think when you actually get to know people, they're very warm, and it actually feels similar to Indians in a lot of ways, where people are extremely warm. It's just this like outwardly resting bitch face, but then when you actually get to know them, they're really warm and friendly, and actually quite personal. Like this girl I met was telling, just first interaction, she's like talking about depths into a relationship and like other things. And so I think people it's like one of those that I love things that are like acquired taste because there's an over romanticization of like an initial attraction, which I still have. Like I was initially attracted to crypto and then held true, but there's also something to like acquired taste, right? Like people don't like beer when they first start drinking it, or I don't know if you don't like a certain type of music, but then you just get used to it. And I think Paris has had that effect on me, and I've really come to like it now.
That's a very thoughtful take. Couple of things just quickly, because I have to respond to them. I've been to Bangalore before. Amazing place. I was only there for a few days, but the food, incredible. The weather, like this is just a super nice city. So would love to get back there someday. And very thoughtful take on Paris. I like it. Like it's like Paris didn't change. You just needed to learn to vibe with it. And I totally hear what you're saying on acquired taste. Like all the things I like the most, I remember really not liking something about them at first. Yeah.
I think there's something about you just have like levels of understanding of something that makes you appreciate it even more. And so you it's something I've kind of evolved my view on, which is initially I would really place a high emphasis on someone being passionate about something before, like say, Llama. And I still kind of do, for crypto, for recruiting for a certain level. But like, if you're still a new person, they should be like relatively passionate about the space. I think that's a high expectation to have. And I think that actually can change over time and it can evolve. And someone can, the deeper someone understands something and appreciates something, the more they'll kind of get interested in it. And and have deeper affiliation with it. And so I've definitely been more open to that over time.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Shreyas. Really appreciate you joining DAO Talk, and looking forward to hanging out with you the rest of the week.
Awesome, man. Great to be here.